So may we start?
Yes, yes, of course.
Yes. So just a short introduction. Our guest today is Professor Piotr Balcerowicz, a Polish philosopher, Indologist, and human rights researcher, currently a professor at the University of Warsaw. His academic work spans philosophy, region, law, and conflict studies with a particular focus on South Asia. He has authored and edited numerous books, and his works, Human Rights Violations in Kashmir and Law and Conflict Resolution in Kashmir, have drawn attention for their meticulous documentation of abuses and legal irregularities in the region. These two books, along with 23 other works, including those of Anuradha Bhasin and Arundhati Roy, were recently banned by the government of Jammu and Kashmir in India. This move has sparked international concern about censorship, academic freedom, and the human rights situation in Kashmir. Professor Balcerowicz, thank you for speaking with us today. Could you begin by telling us what first drew you into researching Kashmir and how these two books came into being?
Well, I would have to go back to 1986 when I studied in India, when I was a junior researcher for 2 years, 86, 7, 8. Kashmir was a place which I didn't know at all in those days. And when summer started in Varanasi, where I studied, it was hot, and lots of my friends told me that they would go to Kashmir because it's a much cooler place. It was the mid 90s, mid 80s, so it was a peaceful place in those days. So this was the first time when I really heard something about Kashmir, and I gradually got interested in the issue of Kashmir. In many ways, because I studied, among other things, I studied Indian philosophy, Indian languages, especially Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali. So naturally, Kashmir was an important place for various reasons. Um, and then, after many years of my research, of my studies of South Asia, of India, I realized, especially in the 90s, especially after 89 and early 90s, I realized that it is a big problem for India in many ways. So gradually, I developed my interest in Kashmir um, as an important place for Indian culture, as an important place for Indian politics, as an important place for the politics of South Asia, for the relations between Pakistan, India, and China. One of the reasons which also puzzled me about Kashmir, in fact, it was probably 1990, 1991, when I realized that Bollywood films were no longer screened in Kashmir. This was at the time when gradually Bollywood industry shifted to other places. Bollywood started screening films even in Europe from mountains, so Kashmir became inaccessible to Bollywood film industry. So this is how Kashmir played also a certain role in Bollywood. So all this generated a gradual growth of my interest in Kashmir, in its problems, in its role, and then it led me to realize that Kashmir is a place where various atrocities are committed. Um, on both sides actually, but mostly on the Indian side, on the part of the India administered Kashmir. So this is in brief how my interest developed. I visited Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, on both parts of the border. I visited India administered Kashmir. I visited Pakistan administered Kashmir. I visited both parts many times. Not always it was easy. Mm, one of the reasons was also my interest in the history of India, Indian art. There was a book by Ramchandra Kak written in 1933. A very interesting person. Ramchandra Kak was both a scholar and the Prime Minister of Kashmir uh, towards, well, in the 1940s. So both a scholar and politician. So once his book, he traveled all around Kashmir, in those days undivided, and he wrote an excellent book which served as an introduction to me of all places, of historical monuments. And I followed his book, I must say. I visited almost each and every place mentioned by him, which means I visited almost everything in Kashmir, with a few exceptions. And I discovered some more places which were not mentioned by him. So my interest, in fact, encompasses both history, culture, Sanskrit culture of Kashmir, as well as the political situation, the role of Kashmir in politics, and the situation of people, of the population of Kashmir on both sides. And this, of course, brought me to the interest to get interested in the violations of human rights. This topic has always been very important to me. It is very interesting, by the way, that when we see surveys in India, we discover that human rights organizations enjoy about 40–50% of the trust of Indian population, whereas the military enjoys more than 90% of trust, which is a very worrisome symptom, because it demonstrates that the people of India trust the military more than human rights organizations. This ratio, this relation should be just the opposite, because human rights observers, human rights are about all of us. Human rights are about the rights of each and every one of us, each and every citizen of India, each and every citizen of Europe, each and every citizen of this planet. So human rights are the most basic rights we can have. And when if people are distrustful about human rights organizations, that means that they don't really know what human rights are. They don't realize how important human rights are, that human rights are about their own welfare, their own health, their own security, safety, and their own benefit. Whereas as we can see, the military in most parts of the world is an oppressive force. Not always, but very often. So human rights, as I say, should be something every citizen of India, of South Asia, should realize their importance. And this is why human rights have always been important to me. I have invested a lot of effort and energy in human rights. I must say that I trained, educated human rights monitors, human rights observers in different parts of the world. I ran a small NGO, Education for Peace, and it was established in 2002. We constructed lots of schools in Asia and Africa, in Afghanistan, in war-torn zones, but also myself in particular and my colleagues, we managed to educate lots of human rights observers in Afghanistan, in some parts of Africa, like South Sudan. These are the people who report on atrocities, on war crimes, on human rights abuses. We also trained such reporters, observers in Myanmar, Burma. So cases which were reported of Myanmar army attacking civilians, bombing villages. Some of these were reported by people I trained myself, or I was one of those who trained them through my NGO. So naturally, human rights are also an important personal interest of me because I realize its importance. So all these aspects which I have mentioned brought me to the case of Kashmir.
I see. The government rarely offers detailed explanations when it bans works like yours. In your view, is this primarily about suppressing facts, intimidating other researchers, and controlling the global narrative on Kashmir? Do you see this ban as a targeted warning, not only to you, but academics, journalists, and even Kashmiris themselves?
I think it has a few different goals. Certainly, one of the goals is to intimidate researchers, to discourage researchers, both Indian and foreign, from doing research on the issue of Kashmir and human rights generally in India. Kashmir is not the only region of India where human rights are violated and have been violated. Yeah, of course, we can immediately think of the so-called red zone, the corridor which goes from the north to the south across India. It is again in the public narrative, in the official narrative, it is associated with Maoists, with Naxalites, with terrorism. But this again has a very particular cause or causes. People do not seek violence or violent solutions because they like them. Very often people, or mostly people, simply think or feel they are helpless. They have no other way to change or influence their situation. So they become desperate because they see that in this case, Indian government doesn't help them. Um, for instance, when we think of the minister of Home Office 15 years ago. He was the same person who was involved in companies, bauxite, who exploited raw materials from Odisha. Then he became a minister of the government. Of course, the main priority of Home Ministry was to impose certain policies of exploitation on the people of Odisha. It is just one of such cases. So when people become impoverished, when they are uprooted from regions where they have lived for centuries, literally centuries, and they see no help from the government, what they see is just the contrary. When it is the government, the administration which oppresses them, then they are helpless. We should understand this process and understand why this violence occurs. So Kashmir is not the only place where human rights are violated, when also rights of Indian citizens are violated. There are other such places. In this case, banning of books is supposed to discourage researchers to investigate such cases of human rights abuses everywhere in India. Um, because it becomes problematic for researchers. Yeah, such researchers may be turned back at the border when they visit India. They may not get the visa. Again, Indian researchers may have problems to pursue their research. They may simply get fired from their academic positions. So it generates a fear. It demonstrates that this is a no-go zone, that this is an area no one should touch. This is one problem. Another problem is perhaps even more important. Um, we have seen that in recent more than 15 years, basically almost last 2 decades, there is a gradual process of the aggregation, of consolidation of Indian media. Basically, when we think of TV, 95% of TV stations is controlled by 3 people. All these people are related to the government, are related to the ruling party. Mm, so this clearly shows that if a simple citizen of India wants to get an information, the person goes to private channels, which are all controlled by people closely connected to the government. If that person goes to state channels, these channels are directly controlled by the state. So basically, India, in India, there is no more an access to free information. Um, the same goes for many radio stations. The same goes for internet outlets. Basically, the situation of the media in India has deteriorated in recent years to a level which is below the freedom of the press in Pakistan. Basically, in last few years, India and Pakistan are on the same level. Sometimes the indicators show that it is worse in Pakistan, sometimes that it is worse in India. This year, the situation was supposed to be slightly better in India than in Pakistan, but I'm sure the new index of press freedoms will demonstrate that the situation in India has deteriorated much worse. We should realize that India finds itself in the worst 30 states in the world when it comes to the freedom of expression. This is not something we would associate with democracy. So, this ban generates a very special effect. Basically, it creates a monolith of information. What is a monolith of information? It is a situation when if a citizen wants to get an information, whichever channel you switch onto, whether radio, TV, internet, or printed press, you get the same information. You have no alternative. So basically, uh, this shows that all channels are controlled by the government. They are shaped by the government. The information is shaped by the government. One of very few outlets for independent information are research books. Solid, unbiased, unprejudiced, well researched. This is science, this is research. So when you close this channel, you basically close almost the last of such uh, sources of free information. Of course, you have social media, but again, the government of India tries to control it. So this is a very unfortunate situation. India is clearly on a path to a condition of the media which we see in North Korea, China, and Russia. As we know, the internet in China and of course in North Korea is completely switched off from the world. Russia is developing a very similar system. Uh, India has not done it yet, uh, but I will not be surprised if this would be the next step to control the internet and to develop a firewall around India that will protect the access to free information of Indian citizens, as it happens in China, North Korea, as it is being done in Russia. So I think this is basically the main goal, besides the first goal of intimidating researchers and also journalists. This is the second goal, and probably the most important, to create the monolith of information, which in practice, if we translate it into practical terms, it is simply a uniform propaganda disseminated by the government.
Since the publication of your book, Human Rights Violations in Kashmir, how do you think that the human rights situation in Kashmir, Bastar, Odisha, and the rest of India, especially Northeast India, how the human rights situation has evolved?
Of course, it has got much worse when my books were published. In fact, there are three such books on Kashmir. Two of them were banned. So, uh, human rights violations in Kashmir. This book was banned. Law and conflict resolution in Kashmir. This was banned. And the last one, which has not been banned so far, is Kashmir in India and Pakistan policies. All these three represent different aspects of the situation in Kashmir. They were all published in 2022, completed around 2020, 2021. When I came to the end of writing final chapters, the abrogation of 370 happened. Mm, I should first say that it is, in many ways, I would consider it rather unconstitutional. But this is a topic for a separate discussion. In one of these three books, I discuss this problem and demonstrate why it was unconstitutional. Mm, it was the beginning of new developments, which could be foreseen 5, 6 years ago, but they accelerated. Mm, Basically, the population of Kashmir has no autonomy at all. It is directly controlled by Home Ministry. The safeguards which protected the population of Kashmir from demographic changes are gone. Why was it important? Kashmir is a tiny place. Jammu and Kashmir, well, 12 million people. This is a small drop when we think of the population of India. And Kashmiris are generally, in many ways, they suffer from poverty, underdevelopment. It is, in many ways, one of the poorest regions. And I would suspect probably it's been done on purpose. So the population of Kashmir is very vulnerable to external influences and external pressures. The abrogation of 370 caused a new situation when certain safeguards which protected the Kashmiris are gone. Now we can have big business. We can have business people who may migrate to Kashmir, buy land, buy property, become citizens of Kashmir. And I can give an example which I suspect, served uh, as an example for India. It is the Chinese case of the Uyghur population. Uyghurs live in the province of Xinjiang, with a capital, formal capital of Urumqi, but the cultural capital is in Kashgar. The population of that province, historical Eastern Turkestan, was dominantly Uyghurs. There were other people, but 100 years ago, basically, that part of the world was inhabited by Uyghurs. There was a gradual change on the part of the Chinese government. The policy was to change the demographics of that province. They constructed a railway to Urumqi, later to Kashgar, and railway brought millions of Han Chinese. Now, Uyghurs, which dominated in that part of India for centuries, have become a minority in that province. Another case is the autonomous region of Tibet in China, actually occupied by China. Now, it is exactly the same situation. It was a Tibetan place where Tibetans lived. There were no other ethnic groups, practically no Han Chinese. But now we have the situation when autonomous province of China, Tibetan autonomous province, is inhabited by 10 million Han Chinese and just 2 million Tibetans. And I think these two cases, which we have observed in China, served, this is my suspicion, served as an example for the policies of India to change the demographics. So I fear then within a generation, the Kashmiris will be a minority in their own historical region. We should remember that lots of Indian philosophers, grammarians, practitioners of Ayurveda were related to Kashmir. They came from Kashmir. They were Kashmiris. This was a very rich tradition, intellectual, cultural, religious tradition. And when you change the population of Kashmir, you also eliminate the vestiges of this rich historical heritage, cultural heritage. So, such processes of demographic change, which we have observed in the case of Uyghurs in the province of Xinjiang, of the Tibetans in the province of Tibetan Autonomous Region, and which may happen also in the case of Jammu and Kashmir in India, they may represent a case of what I would call a cultural genocide, when cultural heritage is eradicated and replaced with new culture, a new culture which is the standard mainstream culture of India. I should perhaps explain what I mean. I've been visiting India since the mid-90s. That's a lot of time. I basically visited almost every place in India, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, many times. And in my life, I have visited very worrisome developments. Mm, India has been very rich in culture. Different regions had their own rich religious cultural traditions. When you went to a temple somewhere in the north or in the south, you had local deities. They had their own names, different names. Generally, a Brahmin would explain that they are like, for instance, this is just an example, like Krishna and Radha. After 30 years or 40 years, these temples are gone. They are replaced with the same pattern of Krishna and Radha. So the local traditions have been effectively eliminated killed and replaced with the mainstream religion. This is sad because basically before, for Hinduism was extremely rich in its various modes of expression, of celebrations, of rituals, of various deities. Now, all these patterns have been uniform, have become uniform. There is no more variety. Whether you go to the north or to the south, you see the same murtis, you see the same celebrations, identical celebrations. It is a very sad loss of Indian culture. And when this process happens also in Kashmir, the richness of this region will be deleted as it happened in many other parts of India. And it is sad.
Uh, in your documentation, checkpoints, mass surveillance, arbitrary arrests, and internet shutdowns, these appear to have become normalized in Kashmir. Do you view these measures as purely counterinsurgency tactics or as a part of a deliberate project to reshape Kashmiri society and culture, as you were just saying?
Yes, in these three books, I use a term four pack, the pack of four items. This four pack, uh, well, it comes from an expression like in Europe, you can buy 4 cans of beer in one pack. You call it four pack. So these 4 cans go together. It is a kind of industrialized process. And this industrialized, standardized process is a part of the oppression in Kashmir, and not only in Kashmir. First, uh, we have the cases of the so-called fake encounters. It is associated with the disappearance of the person, uh, illegal detainment somewhere when family does not even know where their relative is held, then the person is tortured and very often killed in the process, simply dies. So these 4 elements, the disappearance, illegal arrests, illegal detention, torture, and killing, they go together. We have, there are thousands of such bodies. As we know, since 1909, 1910, a large number of mass graves were found. Several thousand of bodies were discovered there. Many of these bodies were victims of the four pack. The people disappeared, they were detained illegally, they were tortured and then killed and put into mass graves. The case of Kashmir presents a very vivid picture of the four pack, but we know very well that this happens in other parts of India, like in the Red Corridor. And again, this is not limited only to India nowadays, because the same four pack is practiced in Pakistan. The same four pack is adopted in Israel against the Palestinian population. So oppressive regimes follow the same process of the four pack. The four pack in India has a few goals. The first is to intimidate the population. The second goal is to extract information or force people to provide false information, to provide false accusations of other people. Another goal is the career. Lots of soldiers of the army, of the police, of armed forces stationed in Kashmir has pursued their careers with the help of the four pack because they get rewards in terms of financial benefits, but also of better ranks, of going up in the hierarchy. So they are in fact encouraged by the system to stage these fake encounters. Innocent civilians who have never supported any terrorist activity, who have never supported violence, have been exterminated through this four-pack. They have become victims of this kind of process. So this is another case, another goal which explains why this kind of intimidation occurs in Kashmir. It is simply, it serves the goals of the armed forces, of individuals in the armed forces, soldiers, officers. It also provides, there's another goal, because this practice provides justification for the government to station such huge contingents of armed forces in Pakistan. We should remember that Kashmir, until recently, was the most militarized zone in the world, with one soldier per 14 civilians, 14 Kashmiri civilians. This, of course, changed with Israeli war against an Israeli genocide against the Palestinian population, because the Gaza Strip is overwhelmed with IDF, with Israeli Defense Force. But perhaps these two places in the world are now the most militarized. And of course, it costs a lot of money. Indian taxpayers pay a lot, and this needs justification. It's very difficult to justify this enormous expenditure on militarization if you face a population which basically does not do anything, just protests, peacefully protests, perhaps sometimes throw stones, but stones are not bullets. So you'll need additional justification. When you produce these fake encounters, you develop a whole system of propaganda which justifies the claim that there are lots of Kashmiris who are terrorists, that basically Jammu and Kashmir is infested with terrorists, that basically almost every single individual of Kashmir is a terrorist. This is the same rhetorics which we see and read in Israeli media, which portray the same picture of Palestinians in Gaza. They say that 6-month-old children are Hamas activists. They are terrorists who support terrorist activities. So basically, we again see a lot of similarities between what is happening in the Palestinian territories, the atrocities and genocide committed by the Israeli forces, and in the case of India. Not to such a large scale at the moment, but again, we should remember that perhaps 70,000 people have been killed in Kashmir. There was just one case in 2006 when Home Minister of India published or allowed the publication of these data. At that time, the number was more than 60,000 civilians killed. It went to the press in Kashmir, but then all the press was withdrawn. So no single paper which contained this information was finally, it was printed, but no single copy of these papers came to the market. They were all confiscated early in the morning. But these were the times when people had no smartphones. Nowadays, everyone would take a picture. In those days, you would need a hard paper copy. So there is no hard paper copy because the printers could not document it, but there are lots of witnesses who saw these numbers. So if you rely on these numbers of the Home Ministry of India, it was 2006, and the Ministry of Home Ministry of India mentioned the number more than 60,000 people. Now we can add another few thousand. So perhaps the number of victims of the conflict in Kashmir is more than 70,000 people. That's a lot. And no investigation has been carried out so far. Not only to analyze what has happened, which in itself is very important, but also to find people responsible. There has been no real investigation in mass graves and investigation who killed people in these mass graves. These are the questions which should be answered in any country which boasts to be a democracy. This brings us to very sad case. India, I emphasize, India has been perceived and also has projected itself as the largest democracy in the world. But we should be very frank about this. All indicators for more than one decade, basically after 2014, demonstrate a sudden decline in freedoms in India, in human rights, in freedoms of speech, in democratic rights. And again, as I mentioned, in the case of freedom of speech, India is on par with Pakistan. Now, India is on par with Pakistan when it comes to democracy. It is shocking. It's very sad because me, my colleagues, we all loved India. It's when everyone asks me, I have visited more than 120 countries in the world. So basically 2/3 of the world. And I have a comparison. I have seen lots of beautiful places all over the world. And if people ask me which place I would recommend them to visit, I always say India. It is the richest place in terms of culture and history in the world, the most fascinating place in its variety of cultural, religious phenomena. So for me, it is very sad to see this decline in political rights. So now India has no right to boast as and project itself as the largest democracy in the world. It is a failed democracy, which is a warning sign before India becomes a strictly authoritarian regime.
Your second book, The Law and Conflict Resolution in Kashmir, it explores how the legal system in Kashmir often ends up legitimizing rights violations instead of preventing them. Could you explain how laws like the Public Safety Act, the PSA, or Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the UAPA, enable repression more than justice?
All these acts, I don't want to go into detail, but they create a system of impunity. Basically, first, almost any activity can be considered as a violation or threat to the security of India, as an act supporting terrorists, instigation to violence, and so on. Basically everything, even my books. Now, it depends on the interpretation because all these laws are extremely ambiguous. They define nothing. They create a certain legal black hole. If you are accused ambiguously of supporting terrorism, then you come into this process. You can be arrested. If you are arrested, you can be held in detention for up to 2 years. Then you are released when you go out of the arrest. you are arrested again for another 2 years. You can spend half of your lifetime in arrest, in detention, without court procedure. You have never been accused of anything. You are suspected of supporting certain vile causes. But nothing has been proved against you. You have been innocent. Uh, and all these acts, legal acts, create uh, a situation when you are guilty before it's been proven. It reverses the basic legal procedure when you are considered innocent until you've been proved to have committed a crime. In this case, you are suspected of a crime. You are no longer innocent. You are arrested. You are deprived of your basic rights. Very often, you are taken out of Kashmir to other parts of India. In this way, you are deprived of your basic right to contact with your family, with your relatives. They know nothing of you for years. Again, unfortunately, there are other countries which follow the same procedure. Again, we see this in North Korea, we see this in China, we have this in Russia, we have this in Israel. The Palestinian population is treated in very same way by Israel as Kashmiris by India. And again, in case of India, Kashmir is just an example because we have similar cases, the Red Corridor, but also the eastern states face the same problems. So all these acts create a sphere of impunity for armed forces. Mm, People, well, soldiers, police officers suspected of crimes, they cannot be put to trial in civil courts. This has to be done in military courts. But there are no cases when soldiers, officers are sentenced for crimes. There is a lot of evidence, but it cannot be presented to courts. So again, this legal system protects armed forces from accountability. So armed forces act in a dual situation. On the one hand, they are encouraged to perpetrate violence, commit atrocities such as fake encounters, because they are promoted, and on the other hand, with another tool, they are assured of impunity. Whatever they have done, whatever crime they have committed, they will not face justice. And again, this creates a system of repression. Civilian population knows this very well. Fears, they are, again, there's another problem. Fears, first information report uh, are not accepted. In most cases, they are simply rejected at police stations. Uh, if a body, that body is found with signs of torture, and that person disappeared long time ago, if the family knows that the person was illegally detained by the state, they go to the police station and want to file a fear. But no first information report is accepted. They are turned back. Uh, so again, this is a very strong signal both to armed forces that they are immune for responsibility, and to the population that they are helpless. So this factor may contribute to violence, because very often violence is the last resort of people. Normally, everywhere in the whole world, people prefer peaceful solutions. Of course, there are exceptions, but generally, people prefer peaceful solutions. They prefer to compromise rather than resort to violence. So when people resort to violence, it is a signal that something is wrong. It is a signal that they feel that their rights of citizens and the means of solving their problems are not accessible to them. And therefore, they resort to other, they feel that they have to resort to other solutions than peaceful resolution and compromise.
You just spoke of the overwhelming propaganda machine, how the freedom of expression has been increasingly limited in India, how the freedom of the press has been bought over by the BJP RSS, which is the current ruling government clique in India. In conflicts like Kashmir, Bastar, and the northeast of India, the northeastern states of Nagaland, Manipur,
Mhm.
in your view, how can independent researchers, journalists, and activists counter such a dominant narrative effectively?
Uh, the means are limited. Of course, researchers need access to go there. To many regions, it's very difficult to go. You need special permits. And it is becoming increasingly more and more difficult. So researchers are barred. I'm afraid it will become even worse. Even a mere suspicion that someone can do research on political situation, human rights violations, uh, may lead to withdrawal of a visa, and the person may be the researcher may be turned back, not allowed to enter India. Even if you do research, your means of disseminating the results of your research are limited. A researcher writes research papers, writes books, research books, perhaps sometimes more popular pieces, more popular articles to press. But again, this is very limited. Researchers generally, by definition, are few individuals, so their number is very marginal. Um, so the means to influence the public opinion are very limited. It's by definition, scientists are always in small numbers. So their impact on mass awareness of problems is very limited. The information, the results of the research can be disseminated with the help of other people, of blogs, of via internet, via talks like ours, through lectures, popular lectures, and so on. But it is still a very difficult problem, because if you have a state which builds a monolith of information, which I have explained, that monolith of information will provide the propaganda, the state propaganda, through all its information outlets, through radio, TV, press, internet. So the sources of information, of independent and well-researched information in such a state, become extremely limited. So practically, we can say that only an elite in a given country will have an access to information. Most ordinary people will simply watch TV, and they will be unaware of what is happening in the country. This is again a very worrisome symptom.
Given the political reality in India today, especially of of places and regions like Kashmir, Bastar, and the Northeast, although I do understand that there is no one shoe fits all solution, what do you see as the possible or necessary steps towards just and lasting resolution to these conflicts?
In basically, I would say in all such conflicts, uh, Well, all such conflicts follow very similar patterns, not identical, but basically you can uh, discover certain structural similarities. We deal here with minority majority conflict. Minorities are always very vulnerable. In healthy democracies, minorities are protected. Uh, if we want to measure whether a state enjoys a robust democracy, we should ask the minorities in that state. If they are happy, that means that the state is a truly democratic state. Um, for simple reasons, the mechanism, for instance, when you have elections to the parliament, uh, in public vote, the minorities can be outvoted, are simply outnumbered by the majority. So basically, in a parliament, we may have a parliament that 100% of MPs represent the majority. It's very simple. But such a parliament does not reflect the real situation in a given country. So when a minority has its representatives in the parliament, when the rights of the minorities are respected, this is a case for a healthy, robust democracy. Now, so minorities serve as a litmus test for democracy. The same holds for India. Now, governments, especially in recent decades, are prone to follow very populistic agenda. We have it in many countries. Trump and the US follows this agenda. Some European countries, India follows this agenda. All populist ideologies cater to the majority. They project minorities as threats. This is a complete nonsense because minorities are never a threat for a simple reason. They are minorities. They are vulnerable. They are outnumbered. They basically, if the majority decides to eliminate them, they will be eliminated physically, culturally, historically. But minorities are extremely important. As I have mentioned before, the richness of India as a place of culture, history, religion, philosophy is due to minorities. India, throughout its history, has never been a monolithic, uniform region. It consisted of minorities. India has always been a place of thousands of minorities. In fact, when each and every of Indian citizens goes back to his or her roots, will discover that you belong to a particular minority. You have your own minority identity. And in fact, the majority is constructed out of a certain set of minorities. For instance, based on the language of Hindi language, you can construct this kind of minority. But Hindi language is just one of such denominators. When we think of the belt of Hindi speakers, again, this belt consists of lots of different minorities with lots of different customs, from Rajasthan to Bihar, practically. Um, and so we see that to construct a majority based on the Hindi language is artificial. You overwrite other distinctions. You can redraw the map of India using different patterns. For instance, you can draw a minority of meat eaters. I consciously used this term because the research shows that in the whole population of India, there is just about 17% of regular vegetarians. That means more than 80% of Indians are not strict vegetarians. Uh, they make exceptions. They may not admit it officially, but they are. It is a cultural thing. I'm saying this, I've been a vegetarian since I was 15. Uh, but we can construct such a majority of meat eaters in India, a very controversial majority. And on the basis of this, we can repress the minority of vegetarians in India. Why not? Uh, by the way, this shows that many members of BJP, many fundamentalist followers of Hindutva values, in their lives very often are not vegetarians. They have made exceptions to this, to vegetarianism. So when we construct a majority of meat eaters in India, many of BJP members and Hindutva activists will become members of those who are vegetarians will become members of minorities. They can be repressed. And if all meat eaters will decide throughout all castes, they might like to enforce an absurd uh, rule in India that everyone has to eat meat. I draw this case of minority versus majority to an absurd situation. I'm doing it on purpose. Of course, this is not a desirable situation, but I'm doing it on purpose to show that first, majorities are constructed artificially based on certain selected values. And second, we all become we all are members of various minorities. For instance, in India, we can say, okay, I'm a Hindu, I'm a follower of a majority of Hindus. As a Muslim, I will be a follower of a minority of Muslims. But when I think of other values, I may suddenly find myself in a minority. I can be I can be oppressed by the majority. So we should all understand that being a part of a majority is, first of all, artificial, and it does not entitle us to repress any minorities because we are in our values, we belong to minorities. And this, I'm mentioning this because majority-minority conflict is such a pattern which is used or misused by politicians who follow populist propaganda, populist agenda. They resort to certain selected values to artificially construct a majority to suppress minorities. How to resolve this conflict? Well, it's extremely difficult because, first of all, we should get rid of the engine behind this process. What is the engine behind this process of populist propaganda? These are politicians who make their careers. They basically become popular. They also have financial benefits by pursuing certain values. When certain values become fashionable, they board the train, they go together with the stream, they propagate this populist propaganda. This is a very problematic situation. In fact, to resolve most such regional conflicts in India and in other parts of the world would require, first of all, responsible government, a government which will be ready to relinquish populist agenda, which will be ready to reshape their state, which will be ready to reshape relations between minorities and majorities. After this long introduction, I'm coming to reply to your question. I needed to explain the complexity of the relations between the majority and minorities. Now, in this case, you need a responsible government which understands these problems. You need also education through various means. I don't mean the standard education through schools, universities. This is, of course, important too, but also responsible media, which treat minorities as litmus paper, which give the minorities their rights. Minorities should be protected for many reasons, as I explained on different occasions, because they preserve certain unique values, they preserve certain unique habits, ceremonies, customs. Some regions of India are fascinating because of minorities there. Tourists go there. Foreign and domestic tourists go to different parts of India to see something unique. What is unique? It's the minority. The minorities. Minorities make India so unique in its different parts. So people should understand that minorities should be respected, that minorities do not pose a threat. It is just the reverse. The majority poses a threat to minorities. Again, very often in problems between minorities and the majority, we have other reasons, economic reasons. I mentioned the case of companies which exploit natural resources, for instance, in Odisha. But it is again just an example. We have many cases when you have tribal areas exploited by by big companies. People are uprooted from their villages. So again, this is the responsibility of the government to stop this practice. I mentioned a minister who served 2 terms as a home minister and foreign minister and economy minister, minister for economy, the same person. He prepared a legal framework for exploitation, or the government, previous governments prepared a legal framework for exploitation of different parts of India. So again, this is a problem of the links between private business, big private business, and politicians, the government. We see in India, in numerous cases, that the law of India, that politicians of India do not serve the cause of ordinary people. They are a part of the business scheme. Many of them are politicians and at the same time business people. They run their own businesses. They were parts of the boards of different companies. So basically, they follow dual agenda, their own business and the interests of the people. Out of these two goals, they of course prefer their own personal gains. So this is another problem. There is a simple word for that, corruption. But this is corruption at the highest scale, at the top of the political hierarchy in India. Because what is corrupt are not only clerks, officers at a lower rank, but top politicians are corrupt. They follow their own personal business agenda and not the interests of the people. We should all understand that politicians are elected as servants of the people. But what we have in India and in many other countries, it is not the case. They are elected, but they do not serve the goals of people.
We are almost drawing to the end of our discussion. the final question that I wish to ask is that if you could speak directly to the people of Kashmir, Bastar, and the northeastern states of India today, at a time when their voices are being silenced and suppressed, what would you want to tell them?
First of all, I want to tell them that I appreciate that they are there. I'm happy that they are minorities because they contribute to the richness of India, they contribute to the richness of this planet. My heart is with them, with all minorities, and I hope that they will be strong enough to preserve their identities, their distinct identities. When we think of a country like India, which has become uniform in all its aspects, what we will have is the scenes which we know from a South Korean film, The Squid Game. People are dressed in the same uniforms, people are eliminated, they are pushed, they are exterminated, killed, they disappear. So uniformity is a threat to our existence, is a threat to our individuality, is a threat to India itself. Nobody wants India to be uniform in the sense of pictures which we know from Squid Games. So people of Kashmir should strive to preserve their own identity, their own culture, their own history, their own identity for the sake of Kashmir and for the sake of South Asia in general, uh, because they contribute to the richness. You people of Kashmir contribute to the beauty of South Asia. You contribute to the cultural, historical heritage of South Asia and of the region, which I have appreciated most of my life. So I thank you for this, that you are there.